Hi, welcome everyone. In this one you will see long abandoned projects that were later completed. You will see an abandoned 60-year-old dam, a hospital getting completed after 40 years, a rail line, and a shocking project that was completed but shut down after a few weeks of operations, and many more. But before we see the completed projects, there's a behemoth that has been stuck at 98% completion since 1994. Nigeria has invested more than $5 billion in this massive complex that started in 1980. The story behind Ajaokuta State Company in Kogi is a very long one, so in order not to derail the subject of the video, we will discuss it at the end. So sit back and enjoy. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and enable notification. Thanks. The Niger Delta Development Commission's headquarters in Port Harcourt is a magnificent edifice that was recently completed and commissioned in March 2021. The first contract for the construction of the 13-story office complex was awarded in June 1994. At the time, the NDDC was known as the Oil and Mineral Producing Development Company, OMPADEC for short. They awarded it at a cost of 4 billion naira to Messrs. Marshland Projects Nigeria Limited. 2 years after, in 1996, the contractor abandoned the site, and the project remained abandoned for 13 years. In 2009, the NDDC woke up from their slumber and re-awarded the contract to the same contractor. Before the second contract was awarded, the NDDC had moved into this building in 2003 because of lack of office space for their operations. Rent on this property cost the NDDC 300 million naira per annum. Why didn't the high rent of the property push the NDDC management to ensure that the project was completed quickly this second time? No, they didn't put much effort into the construction of the office complex because it was abandoned for the second time. It lay abandoned until 2016 when a third contract was awarded to 2 contractors to complete the project. This time, the contract sum quadrupled to 16 billion naira. The completion of the project finally ended many years of waste and profligacy by the NDDC. Under normal circumstances, a project like this wouldn't have taken more than 2 years to build, but in this case it took 26 years. It isn't a surprise considering the NDDC has over 13,000 abandoned projects. At least one is off the list now. What about a project that was built and inaugurated but abandoned a few weeks after? That takes us to the Ogbia water scheme in Bayelsa State. It was built by the federal government to serve the needs of people in 13 communities in Ogbia, including Yenagoa, the capital of Bayelsa State. People in these communities have suffered for a long time without potable pipe-borne water. So in September 2016, the federal government inaugurated the massive water scheme that they built to help the community. What happened next was shocking. The taps went dry. The fanfare was short-lived. What happened to the 5.9 billion naira water scheme? The water project had no mechanical failure. All equipment were still functional, but it was just that the state government that was supposed to run the facility weren't up to the task. It was shocking that the state government could not provide water for their people. Even more shocking is the fact that the federal government intervened and built the water facility, handed it over to the state government to run, but the state government could still not purchase diesel to power the generators that will pump the water. Equally shocking is the fact that the Ogbia community rented the administrative block to some people for 30,000 naira per annum, but they could not use the rent money to power the generators since the state government could not spare 2 million or 3 million naira in their massive annual recurrent expenditure to provide water for the people. Next is the Dadin Kowa Dam in Gombe State. It was conceptualized in 1959. This was before the Nigerian independence. Construction works eventually started in 1980, and by 1988 it was commissioned. But it is just one part of the project because the hydropower plant section wasn't completed. How will the dam operate without electricity? The dam was built for irrigation purposes to enable dry season farming in the area. It was supposed to be a source of water supply for domestic uses to the surrounding communities. It was also supposed to generate 40 megawatts of electricity. So since 1988, after civil works were completed, it has been abandoned. Moves to complete the project started in 2014, and by 2017 the contractor signed a power purchase agreement to add 40 megawatts to the national grid. In 2020, all electrical works and transmission lines were finally completed in Dadin Kowa Dam after 40 years. The dam is now generating electricity and pushing 40 megawatts to the national grid. Now to the Warri-Itakpe Railway. It is no longer news that trains have been running on the Warri-Itakpe rail line for quite some time now. Passenger and freight trains are very active on this line, but do you know when construction work started on this line? Well, it's been a long time ago. The rail line was originally designed to aid Nigeria's road to industrialization in the 1980s. It was meant to be used for the transportation of iron ore from Itakpe to Ajaokuta Steel Complex, covering a total of 51 kilometers. 2 extensions were later added, one to Alaja Steel Rolling Mills and the second one to a jetty, all in Delta State. The jetty was added for the exportation of processed steel or iron ore as the case may be. At the time the standard rail line construction started in 1987, they had set 5 years as construction duration. Construction works would have been completed in 1993, but it was abandoned after 254 kilometers of railway had been constructed. It shouldn't have been abandoned because Nigeria had an oil boom in 1991. Funds for the project should have been set aside to ensure completion. It was never done. Nevertheless, hope for the completion of the project came again during a period of another oil boom in 2009. A fresh 33 billion naira contract was awarded to the original contractor, Julius Berger, to complete the remaining 22 kilometers of rail line, overpasses, stations and other infrastructure that were added to the project. But the hope was short-lived as it was abandoned again in 2015. The reason again was funding. They didn't set aside the funds for the completion of the project during an oil boom. Incredibly, the project got a new life in 2017 when there wasn't an oil boom. More incredibly was the fact that it wasn't funded through a loan. The sum of $200 million was budgeted for the completion of Itakpe-Warri rail line in 2017. This time, money was made available to the contractor despite the fact that there wasn't an oil boom. Commercial operations finally started on this line in 2020. Freight and passenger trains are running on this line. In 2019, a $3.9 billion contract for the extension of this rail line from Itakpe to Abuja was signed. Also included in contract is the Warri Deep Sea Port. The journey of 33 years has finally reached the destination. Now to the Nigerian Navy Reference Hospital in Calabar. It was finally completed and commissioned in June 2018. After more than 40 years, work started. Let's see the timeline. The planning and design stages started in 1976. Construction works eventually started on the state-of-the-art hospital in 1980. Work progress was very slow, and after a few years, it came to a crawl. and was left abandoned. In 1994, hope for the project came when it was moved from the Federal Ministry of Works and Housing to the Ministry of Defense. But by 2012, the project remained largely abandoned, attaining only 30% completion since 1980. Since the Navy is now directly in charge of the project, they started making moves to get funding to complete the project. In 2016, the determination to finish the project finally materialized and new funding was secured. In the next 2 years, construction works on the 150-bed Navy Reference Hospital Calabar was eventually completed and the hospital fully equipped. Okay, let's get on the highway now. Just like the Benin bypass, which was built to divert traffic from Benin City, all eastbound traffic can now take the Benin bypass to complete their journey. That was the same concept behind Kaduna Eastern Bypass. All northbound traffic from Abuja would be able to cut off the Kaduna metropolis from the Abuja-Kaduna Expressway to the Kaduna-Zaria Highway and continue their journey. The 16 billion naira contract for the highway was awarded in 2002, and the contractor mobilized to the site thereafter. The highway was expected to be completed before the end of 2005. By 2015, the highway was still stuck at 30% completion, which translates to 16 kilometers of paved highway. The worst part was the fact that the contractor had collected 10 billion naira, which was more than the value of the project on the ground. In February 2017, a fresh 22 billion naira contract was awarded to the same company to complete the remaining part of the 48-kilometer highway. Construction works are currently ongoing at an advanced stage. Hopefully, it won't be abandoned again, but completed and commissioned in a few months' time. Okay, away from projects now, what about promises that were never fulfilled? It wasn't a good sight that day, and after everything, the government promised to rebuild the homes of the victims, but it never happened. It stayed on paper for 17 years. In 2019, the promise was then fulfilled and they got their new homes. Still on promises not fulfilled, you remember the victorious 1994 Super Eagles squad members that won the African Cup of Nations and advanced to the knockout stage in US 94 World Cup? Yes, they were promised homes by the then Sani Abacha regime as a form of appreciation for their amazing achievement. But nothing was done about it. They didn't receive any homes. Subsequent administrations didn't bother to fulfill the promise. Government should be a continuum, you know. But finally, in 2021, 27 years after the promise was made, the Buhari administration fulfilled the promise. There's one promise that is still not fulfilled by Buhari. He promised during his 2015 campaign in Lokoja that if elected, he will revive Ajaokuta Steel Company. Even the former president, Jonathan, made the same promise in Lokoja, but till today, Ajaokuta Steel Company remains abandoned. Will Ajaokuta Steel Company be left the same way the Buhari administration met it? We have to wait and see. But whatever it takes, Ajaokuta Steel Company should be revived so that it can get back to production and so that Nigeria's industrialization can be actualized. Now let's see the story behind Ajaokuta Steel Company and what has been holding it back all these years. The Ajaokuta Steel Company is located on 24,000 hectares of land in Kogi. Before the concession, it had 4 different types of steel rolling mills with a total installed capacity of 1.3 million metric tons per annum. For comparison, the Ajaokuta Steel Company is bigger than the one in Alaja, Katsina, Osogbo and Jos combined. Anyway, these small plants were built to depend on Ajaokuta steel for their operations. The Russians who built the Ajaokuta steel plant abandoned it in 1994 at no fault of theirs because the government didn't release funds for the completion. Following inactivity without producing any steel, the Obasanjo administration decided to concession Ajaokuta Steel Company. In 2004, an Indian company, Global Steel Holding Limited, emerged the winner of the concession in controversial circumstances. It was revealed that Obasanjo approved the concession by himself in violation of the BPE Act. A few years after the concession, the company started stripping all valuable equipment and machineries from Ajaokuta Steel Company, which led the Yar'Adua administration to set up a committee to check the concession process and the entire state of the steel complex, including the Itakpe Iron Ore Mining Company, which was sold after the Ajaokuta Steel Company concession. The committee's report indicted GSHL. They confirmed the removal of assets from the complex. So Yar'Adua terminated the concession in 2008. Thereafter, Ajaokuta Steel Company stopped production and the government continued paying the workers' salaries to the tune of 3.6 billion naira per annum. Dissatisfied by the loss of the concession, GSHL took Nigeria to an arbitration court in London. The case was going on and all of a sudden, the former Attorney General Mohammed Adoke applied for an out-of-court settlement, which Goodluck Jonathan granted. To cut the whole story short, in 2016, the government signed a revised concession agreement with GSHL, which allows them to keep operating in Itakpe Iron Ore Mining Company during the reduced concession period of 7 years instead of the earlier 10 years. While the government will find ways to revive Ajaokuta Steel Company, the problem is the revival has not taken off and people need jobs, and we can't have a company that can provide about 10,000 jobs and thousands more indirectly and do nothing about it. Worst of all is the fact that more than $5 billion was invested in this project and we are getting nothing in return. The value of the project has gone down considerably. The Buhari administration should do something fast and not let Ajaokuta Steel Complex continue rotting away. If you are a concerned citizen, tell us how you feel in the comments so that this video will gather traction and maybe the authorities will see it and finally do something about it. Is Ajaokuta Steel Complex not supposed to be part of Buhari's diversification of the economy away from oil? Even the Senate understands the potential of Ajaokuta Steel Company because they recently passed a bill seeking $1 billion from Nigeria's excess crude account to be used to complete the massive project. This bill was, however, rejected by Buhari. He cited the fact that Nigeria cannot afford to commit such an amount amid competing priorities. He also said that appropriating $1 billion from the excess crude account was not the best strategic option for Nigeria because of budgetary constraints. Well, that's understandable because the oil price was low at the time. But what about funding the project with a loan? No project in Nigeria deserves a loan more than Ajaokuta Steel Complex, because of the massive impact it will create in the Nigerian economy. If operational, it might lead to an outright end of steel importation in Nigeria. According to the NBS, Nigeria imports $15 billion worth of steel annually, and Ajaokuta Steel Company can earn more than $1 billion per annum from exports if it becomes fully operational. Okay, wonderful viewers, thank you all for watching. Remember to subscribe to our channel and enable notification. Till next time, bye bye.